Okay, I think we've got two areas to look at here, haven't we? We've got the fact that the property is empty, coming into disreputable behaviour that's going on in an empty property, that it may become boarded up, it's run down generally. Personally, I believe in trying to bring back something called civic pride. Civic pride doesn't have to be looked at holistically across the whole area. We can bring it down into smaller pockets, and I believe each neighbourhood should try and form some sort of civic pride themselves. If we go back to 30, 40, 50 years ago, people had civic pride in the areas that they lived in, the way they looked after their own streets, their own communities and everything else, and that we've got to find some way of bringing that way back in. I don't think we'd ever get back to the area where, again, that you could walk out, leave your back door or your doors open and go out for the day and come back, but we've got to bring some sort of civic pride back in, and properties that are empty, that are in disrepair, vandals using them to just go into organised crime and boarded up properties certainly doesn't bring any civic pride to that area. People are going to lose value of the properties that they have in that area. It will not bring any aspirations to get people to look after properties, and in fact it will make the area run down, even become worse, I think. And so yes, I agree we need to do something about it. Now the people that need to do something about it are probably Shoreline or an agency rather than the authority. If we look at the marvellous job that Shoreline have now done in this area since it was handed over to Shoreline for our council properties, I think they've done a fantastic job. And if that's the sort of job they can do, the property that's gone over from the council, then they probably are the right agency. We'd have to look at that, but that's off the top of my head. That's my guess, that Shoreline would be the right people to do it. We certainly need to ensure that there's some funding there from some source, as you put in your question. I don't think the council should back away and just say it's Shoreline's problem. It's certainly a multidisciplinary agency task, this, where a number of agencies need to get together to enable it to happen and for it to be successful. But I believe Shoreline are probably ultimately the agency that will take it on.
Right, Keith. Thank you. Andrew.
Well, very quickly, I would say it's one of the priorities of North East Lincolnshire Council, and the desire that these empty properties, which create a huge problem in various communities, and particularly in the terrace type areas, that we have to tackle them. And over the past 12 months, I think we've seen about 100 empty derelict properties brought back into use, because we've actually threatened landlords with compulsory purchase orders. I think we've got about 5 still on the go, which is being challenged. But it is the intention of the council to pursue the owners of these properties to make sure that they're brought back into use as quickly as possible. I think we have to face reality and say that Shoreline, since they've taken over the old housing stock, and it's predominantly the old council housing stock, that they've attracted a lot more investment into those areas to modernise them and bring them up to decent standard. You will see, for example, there's a crane in the Arbor area where redevelopment is actively taking place. But we cannot leave it up to Shoreline and suggest it's for a body such as Shoreline, because obviously they have to make best use of the funds that's made available to them through the Housing Corporation.
Okay. Thank you, Andy. Austin.
Well, I mean, I think things are moving on this area, but moving far too slowly. I think the boarded up and empty properties are a blot on the landscape and a symptom and a cause of the decline of an area, because next door people want to move out. If the property is like that, you often find people ripping off the boarding and breaking in and using the property. You find a concentration of drug use, so the whole area goes down, and the deserted, boarded up and empty properties are both a cause and a symptom of that. Now, it's got to be dealt with. The two issues are money and powers. Some of the houses actually belong to Shoreline. If you look around on non-stop. Shoreline itself has a number of boarded up houses, some of which they've had as part of the council stock, and people have declined to move into them. And since they couldn't get a tenant to use them, they've boarded them up. There's also a lot of more derelict property alongside Peaks Parkway from the old streets there. Now these are two different categories, but the council has now got powers to take them over. As Andrew said, they have been using those powers, and certainly I've been pushing for a long time for them to use those powers. That's a good thing. That's helping. Shoreline has another problem entirely, which is that while it was brought in, a large-scale voluntary transfer, to bring private sector money into housing so that the expenses didn't fall on the council and on government, they're now finding it difficult. Given there's a credit squeeze on and the capital markets are extremely tough and in some cases drying up, they're finding it difficult to get the money to regenerate the housing. That situation will ease. But in the meantime, it's up to people like me to keep pressing the government. They gave some money a couple of weeks back to allow councils and, more important, housing associations to take over houses facing repossession and add them to council stock, so they don't, or shoreline stock, or housing association stock, so they don't become derelict. But we need more money for that purpose, and basically we need the Bank of England to pump in more liquidity into the banking system so that the banks and the building societies and the capital markets actually begin to lend to each other again and end this credit squeeze, which is hampering Shoreline's efforts to improve the housing that it's had to board up, particularly in non-stop. If you walk round there, it's a disgrace.
Okay.
But it needs money and it needs the power.